everybody. So a couple things. First of all, I hit 300 subscribers, which might not be a lot for some people. I mean, I see people out there with thousands and thousands of subscribers, but you know what? It's a lot to me, and I'm grateful that people like my videos. And if more people come to enjoy watercolor, just never having tried it before, I'm happy about that. And the feedback that I've gotten is people seem to like it. And you know, again, I'm not an expert at it, but I have found such enjoyment in it that if I can get you to try it and just have more fun with it, if you're a watercolor painter and you've been using something like, you know, round brushes and you want to go more fast and loose and just have more of a good time, then obviously the Hake brush is something you're going to be interested in. I just did a craft art fair over the weekend. It was fun. I had a good time. I don't think it's something I do all the time because my passion is painting and not, you know, standing behind a table. But I did have one guy, he got one of my brushes, got one of the Ron Ranson Hake brushes, I should say. And it got me to thinking, this person paints, but they use, again, the small brush painting in, you know, small format. And he was very interested in the style of painting. I actually did a demo while he watched. But it got me to thinking, let's say you've never painted, or let's say you're coming from the small brush. Something like this is going to be more of a challenge than using something, even if you've not painted before, you're going to be comfortable with something like a pencil. It's just going to be natural for you to want to get into detail. This is designed to not focus so much on detail. So I thought to myself, when this person gets this home, or anybody buys one of these, they order it online and they get it, what's their experience going to be like? When I got mine early on, I didn't come from painting, so I didn't come from painting watercolor. I did other things, but I started very early on doing the large brush, just because of, you know, the whole Bob Ross thing and everything. So I thought, well, what's going to happen when you get this brush home? What's the first thing that you're going to want to do? So let's go ahead and we'll do an unpackaging. Can't call it an unboxing, but here when you get your package, it's sealed in this plastic. I've had these for a while, so I don't know if they're still like this, but they should be. So let's cut off the top and let's take out the brush. And also the contents here, and it just says Ron Ranson Hake by Pro Art. And you'll notice here it's stiff, if you can tell. It's got, you know, whatever starchy material on there. So this is the first thing that you're going to experience. You can kind of smell it. It has a little bit of a goat smell. When you dip it in water, it's going to smell a little more. So let's go ahead and we're gonna go into what the first thing is that we're going to do with it. All right, so first things first is you're going to want to put it in water. And you don't want to use hot water because it can shrink the hairs. Just like if you're doing wool or, you know, something like along those lines, you wouldn't want to wash something in hot water. So we have cold water, and I have it in my water pot here. So you're going to want to put it into the water pot, and you know, for at least a few minutes, you have to work off that starchy material, that gum or whatever that's on here, and it's going to remain stiff. And the reason for that is it's holding together the hair, as you can see, where you get that razor edge from when it's brand new. So you're going to want to have it in that water for several minutes until that starch loosens up. And then once it's, you know, you check it out and get the water off of it and rinse it a few times, you'll notice that it's pretty much ready to go. It's going to soften up. You just make sure you get all that off of there and give it a few minutes and run it through several times. And then we'll be ready to paint something. Okay, so we've got our sheet of paper up here, and I suggest you can use something inexpensive if you like. This is a house brand for one of the art stores. I believe it's 25% cotton, not 100% sure, but I'm going to use what maybe the beginner would be using in their house for their first time of trying. So obviously if you've never painted before, or even if you're painted with small brushes, you're going to want to jump right in. I know I would. I'd want to jump right in and do a whole entire painting. But, you know, you have to kind of get a little used to at first what this brush is going to do with the amount of water that it holds. So here we have the Hake brush with a full load of water on it. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, and we'll do the most basic painting that you could possibly do to get started. But the first thing that you can do is you can go back and forth like this and get an even coating of water across the whole paper. Later on, you may decide to leave the bottom dry so that you could do other things and only coat where you're going to do like the sky and things. But for these purposes, we're going to start out doing the most basic painting just to get you used to your first effort with the Hake brush. I usually like to do 2 coatings. Now, if you start painting on top of these 3 coatings right away, it's going to be too wet. So just sit back for a second, just kind of look at the sheen on the paper and give it a second just to absorb into the paper. Once that little sheen sort of goes away, then you're ready to start. Now, I recommend, and this is going back to what Ron Ranson taught, is you take a little raw sienna and you make a very diluted color out of it. It's very, very light. And for this, you can just go straight across with it all the way down. So that's how you would start. Now later on, you could do different things with it, but all the way down the paper with just a diluted raw sienna wash. Very light. If you make it too dark, it's going to be entirely too yellowy looking. So we're just going to keep it very, very simple and just a wash all the way down. That will help colors blend in together. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some Ultramarine Blue, and we're going to mix just a little bit of Payne's Gray in there. But you can just go straight Ultramarine. You don't have to. You keep it one color. But I think Ultramarine by itself makes for a too bluey sky. So at one point you could have drawn a line across the middle if you wanted to know where you were going to stop with your horizon line. But just take and go back and forth with that blue on there and let it run out of color, and then stop at where your horizon line is. Now, these brushes do shed. You can see, look real close. See the little miscellaneous hairs? You can kind of pull on this before you start lightly and get some of these out. Okay, so we're just going across the paper with this blue. Should be darker at the top because a sky typically is darker the further you look up, and it gets lighter toward the horizon line. Now, for the bottom section, let's go ahead and adjust my lighting a little bit. It's just reflecting a little too much. And we'll leave it right there. Now at this point, you can go right into some burnt sienna. Burnt umber, I'm sorry. Burnt sienna is fine too. And you can create sort of either a beachy area or a foreground area. Keep that horizon line straight. And there you have really a very simple completed painting. And you could say, well, that's nothing, but at least you got the idea and you can let it dry and you could see what it's going to do. But from this point forward, in theory, you can actually start going more complicated if you want to. You can take your ultramarine and you can take your Payne's Gray and you can create a little mountain in the background here. And there you have a mountain scene, and it just gets you used to using the brush. It's not, when you're thinking about doing a very complicated scene, of course, early on, but you want to understand how the brush basically works. You can take a little cloth and you can dab out you can create a little bit of a cloud pattern if you want. That could be another little thing that you do if you want to do a little bit more complication in it. And once you get this bottom area done, you can take a little more burnt umber, maybe a little blue, and you can put in some darker variations down here in the ground just to test it out. And then you can let this dry, and you could say, I did my first completed painting with the Hake. I see how much water is going to flow. This way, if something happens, you're not like getting disappointed with yourself. You just don't want to come in with that disappointment. And then on your next one, you could say, okay, I'm going to try this now, and I'm going to try to get a little fancier here. But at least your first one will tell you, you know, it'll give you an idea of how this Hake brush is going to react. Because no one can really tell you how much water you're going to use on this. It's something you have to experience. And it's one of the main things about watercolor painting is the water control. And I can't say you need an ounce of water on the brush here. You know, it's just one of those things you almost have to get used to doing. But on your next one, then you could say, okay, that turned out pretty well. I'm going to try the little card scraping and putting in the little rocks, and, you know, maybe you want to put in some more, you know, darker clouds on top. You know, once you get into getting used to things, then you can go in and you can do these other things. But try wet into wet. Keep it very simple. You know, then you could try putting in, you know, more foreground mountains if you want to. And I'm purposely doing it this way. It's not the greatest paper. It's not the greatest painting. But this is what I feel most people, their first time out with the Hake, are going to experience. So this is what to expect. Your results may vary, but when you do it on your first time and you're doing it on inexpensive paper, I want you to prepare yourself to say, you know, the level of success that you're going to have, so that you don't get discouraged, but yet you're encouraged to do it. So a lot of your first ones will turn out like this. I know mine did. You know, mixing colors, all of that will come into play later. Putting in a tree and all of that kind of stuff. So that's it for just the basic. Let's go ahead and take this off. And boy, I really did not like that paper, I gotta say. That was an art store house brand of paper. But what you are really trying out is, am I going to like this form of painting? And if you enjoyed the fluid movement of the water and the paint, you felt some stress relief, and you say, you know, this is something I could just do, and, you know, there's no pressure, there's no rush, and you enjoy yourself, then you have something there. I know when I did my first Hake brush, I really liked, I mean, I did a one color, like a burnt umber painting, and it turned out really well. But then as you get going in here, obviously you can start doing some fancier things, you know. Get yourself a little bit better paper. You know, you can get into the cotton papers later if you want to. I'm not a super big fan of the cotton papers, but you can get into that later. So we'll go ahead and we'll do 3 coats on this. This is the Fabriano 11x14. I like 11x14 because it fits right into a standard frame here in the United States anyways. We have 11x14 frames that are ready to go. Again, the raw sienna all the way down. You know, before you invest in too much, if you got an old hair dryer laying around, that's a good thing to invest in. And so there we have our basic water applied and then our raw sienna wash. And again, as you start getting going, you can create darker areas with the raw sienna wash and start creating some light areas. Now, one of the things that the person noticed that I was doing in my demo was the amount of paint that I put on. I'm not shy with the amount of paint I put on. Now, some people like the transparent watercolor look. Some people like to use a little more paint. Ron Ranson was always about, don't be shy, squeeze liberal amounts of paint onto the paper, you know. Now, you'll notice one thing is when you get a brand new Hake brush, I'm noticing this now, is when you get a brand new Hake brush, it holds a lot more water than it does, it seems to, when it's new rather than when it's broken in. And you're going to notice things, how this brush bends and how you can use the corner of it. that's what you want to play with, is how this brush bends and how you can use the side of the brush. Because a lot of people, when they use this kind of brush, what do? They take and they scumble the side with it. So you're using the side of your brush. Well, you're going to use the side of your brush in this too, but it's a much wider area. Now, once you do your big washes, you can go back to that smaller brush for a while if you're comfortable. But I would recommend and say, at least lay in these bigger washes. And you can start playing around with the skies. When you do your skies and washes and things, you kind of got to do it before it dries. It's another thing, is because it will dry within a couple minutes. So you have a couple minutes to do your sky. So it has to be laid in rather quickly. But you can see how much water, hopefully, in this video. There's a lot of moisture on the brush. And you can paint for a while before you have to really dip it in. When you do go to dip it in just the tip of the brush. Don't plunge the whole thing in there, because now you got a full load of water. As you continue painting and you work your way down the paper, you're going to use less and less water, and your brush is going to be drier and drier because you want a more heavy concentration. So there is our sky and our land. As we move into what would be basically our second painting. The first one, again, it's an experiment. You're not familiar with the brush. So in this one, as you move along, this is what you're going to try. And you're going to work on skies. It's going to take several paintings for you to really get something that you say, I'm happy with the results of that. And this is what's going to probably happen as you go along. Notice the clouds, they're very solid looking. There's really no pattern in them, and this is what happened to me the first time. Not the first time, but when I started working on skies, I didn't have enough variation. So that's going to happen to you too, and you're going to have to work out the variation, the cloud patterns, and so forth. So now that we've dried this, you don't really want to go back over the sky again. But at this point here, you could put in just little hills and little mountains. And don't be so quick to clean your brush. Let different colors happen on your brush. It'll give you more variation that way too. It's one thing I found. Every color I would wash my brush. It doesn't give you... You're just working with solid colors then. You don't have to wash your brush that often. But again, that's something you're going to find as you go. And as you go, you can add on little tricks like scraping in things, or you can use other methods. This is what you would call dry brushing. There's not a lot of water now in the brush. It's very, very dry. And as you do quick sweeps across, it just hits the fiber of the paper that's sticking up, and you get some sparkles, as they call it, if that was to be some water there. So these are little things you're going to try, and your first paintings are going to be very experimental. And you can go back and watch some of my beginner videos. Don't be fussy about things, though. Don't even worry really how it's, that's not perfect. Just let it happen. Just do shapes, triangles. Just leave little areas where, your land's going to end, your water's going to begin. And then as you start going on and you start learning how to handle the brush more and more, well, then you can add little accents, things at the edge of the water here, and start doing more and more tricks as you go along, And you'll start to notice how you can make the brush very fine at the edge. You use the side, it bends, and once you start getting really comfortable, you can just very quickly... Now, my brush is a little dry. I'm just going to dip the tips in because, again, this holds a lot of water. You just dipping the first 1/16 of an inch of the brush in there gives you plenty of water. Plenty. And look at how much is on this brush now. See, and then you can start dropping in some trees and things. And then when you start getting experience with that, now you can go down to your little brush. If you were used to this, your number 2 or number 3 rigger, and you put a lot of paint on that, and you start doing your branches. Don't worry about shadows early on. dropping in shadows and trying too much fancy stuff. Really get to know that brush. Use it every day. Do one painting a day with that brush. And have the fun of the big strokes. Have the fun of just, a quick, and see what happens with it. And let it dry. You got to trust it when it dries that it's going to look, there'll be things that happen that you didn't even plan on, and you'll go, wow, that looks really neat. The watercolor has a life of its own. And you can see now how we have a little bit of water here. We've got some trees with some branches. Again, I'm keeping this very simple. And you see me paint probably this composition a lot, but I just think it's a very simple one. You can make your trees smaller. I like to run them off the page. I made my mountains in the back very small, so it really looks like it's far back there. Experiment with different colors, different combinations. It's going to take several. But in the process of it, you should be having fun and zoning out all the world stuff and, just, hey, what happens if I do this? Don't be like, okay, I don't want this one to turn out, or I'm going to waste paper. This paper costs 50 cents a sheet. It's not really that much, so just let it happen and have the enjoyment of it. Look at right here. Look at this little light, how it's hitting the edge of the tree. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just something that's happening, and it happens to look very, very neat. So play with it, practice with it. The last thing, let me show you one more thing. When you get your brush now and you dry your brush off on a towel, you got to have a towel with this brush. You got to have, and I'm talking about a towel. You got to have a towel so you can dry this baby off when you need it. So look at when you get it all dry and roughed out. Now you can stipple with it. So the brush has just become a whole nother tool in your arsenal. And when you want to put like green leaves on a tree, you just pound it into the paint and get a good amount of paint on there. It's got to be pretty dry at this point. Look at, and then go in light to begin with. If there's a weird color on there, you can go back and do a little correction if there's too much of something, but kind of just go in light and start dabbing. And then just notice as you press it harder and harder to get more paint off how it reacts. By the way, you will notice that goat smell as you get it more wet. Now, see, I got a lot of blue paint on there. It's okay. There's not really blue leaves, but that's going to happen. Again, I'm not doing this with any real sort of care. I want to do this as if I was doing this for the first time, in a sense, along with you. So I have the experience. And remember, kind of dark against light as you do things, so it stands out on the background. Just put a little bit of grass in there. And that's really it. I hope you guys get this brush and you have a good time with it. And it helps you in your painting to just be faster and looser and just be freer with your painting, so you have a good time with it. So that's it. That's all I have to say in this episode, in this upload, this video. Again, I want to thank everybody for the subscribing. 300 subscribers. That's amazing to me. But I'll try to come up with new and different content as I can. I don't want to repeat or do a lot of the stuff a lot of other people are doing. That's why I did this with the new Hake brush. And it will take some time for you to break this in, by the way. You'll notice as you're painting, you may start seeing where the hairs split off. You get what I call the devil horns. But as you go along, you'll tame it and you can shape it with your fingers. And for the most part, you should get that razor edge. You get control over getting that. You see how it just goes back to that nice razor edge. And after you wash it for the final time and get all the water off of it, make sure you leave it like that, not in the stipple position. And, don't leave it in the water container, obviously. But just leave it to dry. And don't leave it on the bristles because they'll bend and be, in a certain way. So you want to, put it in maybe a jar upright. But that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you again. And we'll see you next time.